All right. I'm sitting here with my good friend Erik Ulin, Vice President of Business Development at NuOrder, and old friend, old supporter of Scandinavian Man. How are you, Erik?
I'm good. How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So I saw on your Instagram stories from your daily run that you are in some snowy place somewhere. I could have mistaken it for the northern Sweden. Where are you now?
I'm in the in Northland of California, as we say. I'm in Tahoe, and I was not expecting the snow in this magnitude at least. I was caught halfway in my run and ended up being almost frozen to death, but it was good.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So how long have you been holed up there?
It was like 2.5 months now, early
Right.
February until now, so it's just counting. And I can't say it's not. It's a nice place to be, so I'm not going to complain about it.
No.
We were in the mountains. It's beautiful. It's quite serene. It's kind of unreal how it is here versus in other cities. So I'm happy about that anyway, to be here.
So just starting off with another topic that people are talking about. You're running a team. You're working remotely, distributed workforce. How's that working out for you?
Pretty good. I mean, I was based in New York before this, and my headquarters are in LA. So we were doing Zoom calls before it was a thing.
Right.
But it works pretty well actually. I think we're lucky to be in this. I mean, the new order that I work is, we're digital, we're B2B e-commerce, so it's a digital platform to begin with, which has been a pretty good transition. I think it's all up. I think it's depending on how you are. I think here, again, I'm lucky to be here. We have a separate office space here. It's one thing to be holed up in. We have a 2-bedroom, 2-bath in New York with
Mm.
4 people, and that's a very different challenge. But here, it's been pretty good actually. So not too bad. But lots. I don't think I've ever been as many Zoom calls or video conferences as I've been here. But it's been a good experience. I think it's going to have a lot of. It'll be interesting to see how kind of business life develops after this, based on the experience everybody has. But it's not bad. I mean,
So,
considering the current circumstances, it's not that bad.
yeah, I'm curious about what some of the things you've learned from this. And I guess I saw recently that a few of the tech giants over there in the States, they're actually extending this work from home policy throughout the end of the year. I'm not sure how you are tackling it from your end, but is there anything you've learned from running a team or working together with your colleagues during these times?
I think people, they do the job they have to do, right? I mean, I think especially in these times, also even having a job is a good
Mm.
thing, right? So you don't slack off on anything, right? I mean, it's something where like you have to do and you do it well. And I think that people take. I think it just like it proves out. I think what I think a lot of us knew, where it doesn't really matter where you are, as long as you. I mean, like our office is our computer and our phone. That's pretty much it. And wherever I physically am is kind of irrelevant. So I think that's been a pretty positive experience. I think in these times too, where maybe you would have taken that flight somewhere, people, nobody expects it now, and nobody really thinks it's weird that you're in your home office or in your bedroom, wherever you're set up. Nobody thinks that's weird. So I think that's the part where some of the social aspects obviously are more difficult to maintain, but in the light of things, I think people are pretty good. I mean, I think we have a good, there's people, they're arranging, like happy hours or doing like trivia nights and stuff like that. So there's still the part of like keeping the company together, which is good. And then
Hmm.
also just seeing, when we do town halls, when there's like, almost 200 people on a Zoom call, it's kind of crazy to see everybody in one room, like in one virtual room that way, right? It just becomes it's an interesting way to look at who you're working with, I think. So it's been interesting. And like I said, I think a lot about like what it's going to be for us going forward, not just for us as a company and a service, but if you just look at like, I think business travel will be a very, very different thing going forward, right? I think, I've done enough like 1 day turnaround trips to Los Angeles that they won't happen anymore
No, no.
for that 1 or 2 hour meeting when a video conference has proven itself to be pretty productive. And if you can be 90% productive at 20% of the cost, I know what I'm taking, you know?
No, and what do you think about the workspace, the actual office? Because I was listening to Scott Galloway talking the other day about how actually going to the office might become like this perk. It's like it's something that we will look forward to. Visiting our coworkers, chit chatting around the water cooling, all those stuff. And also, I'm assuming there's money to be saved here for companies as well.
For sure. I think if you look at commercial real estate in New York, just before this, I think it was at its all-time high in terms of rent per square foot, and that is no
Mm.
longer the case, right? I mean, you look at from the fall of, the WeWorks of the world, that stuff, down to just now. I mean, like, I think people look at, and I've had many conversations where people have big office space and they're like, well, why do I really need this? Or do I really need to have even a showroom, right? Like, I'm not going to be able to use it the same way. So why would I pay, you know, 5 times rent for a place where I use 10% of the space? So I think it'll be much more that you'll have downsizing in terms of offices. But to your point, though, it becomes that part where, you know, as much as I like being at home, I also like getting out sometimes. So just having like, okay, I'll go, Thursday at the office or Friday at the office, and there's something you're doing there to meet up and, to kind of further. I mean, I think from a company culture perspective, I think it's pretty important. So I think
Right.
that part will still, there'll still be the challenge to kind of create a real cohesive company culture through video conference. I don't. That's the real challenge, I think. I mean, we were all lucky coming into we were in a company that has a culture, right? So it's a part of kind of maintaining it is tricky, I guess. But at the same point, like, it's hard if you started now and you just everything on video. It's difficult to have like a coherent company culture in that way.
Right. Speaking of showrooms, I want to get into sort of the future of fashion and retail and all these difficult subjects that we're facing right now. But for those listeners who doesn't know what NuOrder is, just a brief rundown of the company and the service that you provide.
Yes. So we're a B2B e-commerce, right? That's what we do. So it's the company was started about 10 years ago in an effort to digitize basically line sheets for brands to begin with. Because I think we both know that it's been challenging for like the fashion world to really jump onto, other than the consumer facing part, right? To jump onto the new technology parts. But that's something we've been doing for a long time. Now we also do the other side of it. So we have since about 2 years ago, we develop an enterprise platform for retailers. So Nordstrom, for instance, like this is their buying platform. So all their buying teams uses NuOrder as their tool for assortment planning, merchandising, and buying. So that's been a very big growth area for us. But then, also now we're exploring, and this is kind of my role, is to explore that, but also explore like other verticals and other services where there's a need for a commercial backend to actually do commerce. Because I mean, at the end of the day, that's what people want to do. If you have a
Mm.
company, if you're a retailer, if you're a brand, like you kind of need to meet up and do commerce, whether that's virtually or if it's in person. And that's what we are. So we have something like, I think, 2,000 brands on our platform. There's something like, I think it's 500,000 retailers across the world that interact with the platform in terms of purchasing. So it's a very established platform, very, very powerful. So it's an interesting part to be part of. I've always been passionate about that intersection of fashion and technology, and it's fun to be here overall, but it's also very interesting to be here right now.
Before this started, let's talk pre-Corona for a while. Let's like comfort food for a while. What were the sort of challenges and opportunities that you were addressing as a company before, and then I want to get into how it sort of changed.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it was, we were getting a lot of momentum in terms of brands coming on and retailers coming on. I think that's, I mean, obviously, like, there was a lot of momentum going into the brand, to the company. I think it's grown like 2-3 times in the last couple of years. So
Mm.
it's a fast growing company. And I think, so I mean, the main part becomes like once, specifically here in the US, once, like, where we went into the year in January, I think everybody thought there was going to be a supply chain problem because of China. Turns out it was a demand problem, and which is way, way worse, right? So I think that part has affected everybody. So, nobody's quite immune to this wherever
Mm.
you sit in the value chain. So that's been a challenge to kind of to reorient and really kind of figure out where we're going. And one big part has been for us realizing that, the whole calendar and how fashion is bought through, like, on the wholesale side changes, because now if you can't see, touch and feel the garments, how do you do that better? So it's really kind of, for us, we've launched now the virtual showroom, like to really get people to be able to give you that experience as a buyer, even if you're not there, because that's what
Right.
everybody has to do now.
Right.
So it's really that, to kind of to really, really focus on that experience, because I think that's the part where really taking the e-commerce, like the consumer-facing e-commerce, and really putting it into the B2B platform, which is what we did from the beginning. It's really kind of taking that to the next level now.
So, have you gotten a lot of new requests during these times for these virtual showrooms and this stuff? Because we're moving into the buying season here now, for most of the
Lots.
brands. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the conversation that we're having with everybody, right? That's the part to kind of see, like, it's really kind of figuring out like how a market's going to work, when a market's going to be. That's not, I mean, that's not something I don't think anybody really knows, right? But we're trying to make sure that everybody is as set up as they possibly can be. So yes, that's been the main thing. I think we're seeing now from the U.S. I mean, we're a U.S.-based company, but we work a lot with Europe. So we're starting to see now that, Europe is about a month ahead of us in development, let's say. Starting to see now where, the bigger brands are starting to move, and they all know that they have to kind of, even if they didn't think about it before, they're thinking about it now. And so now we're having conversations with everybody, which is interesting. I mean, it's an interesting place to be, but it's I mean, it's challenging for everybody. So trying to figure out, like, to start to guide people on what to do, how to do it. I think everybody talks about virtual as in, like, is it VR? What is it? Like, even if you wanted to, like, how would you actually do it? Like, and do you have the money to do it? Like, it's really kind of guiding people in what that means. But I think that's the part to kind of be, it's not just a platform, it's a service, right? So you have to figure out, like, how do you guide customers, and that comes into kind of being able to have a good network of preferred suppliers. It's being able to guide them, like, if you want to have a photo shoot in Paris, whenever that opens up, who's going to be able to do it, right? Okay, cool. We have, 10 people there. We know who to go to. We know the good people. We talk to them all the time. Like, that's the part that we're able to mobilize and do.
So a lot of people in the fashion industry are waiting with, a normal year you would head over to Milan and Florence and Paris and all these places in about a month, at least from the menswear perspective. Have you learned anything yet, or anything new about the behavior in going through these sort of digital formats? Not in terms of what you provide, but in terms of how people are tackling it, how people are approaching this new way of buying or seeing garments or seeing product.
We've had the privilege. I mean, we're part of it Saks as well, and also Bloomingdale's, right? So we've actually enabled Saks to do remote buying, like buying by appointments. We did that already in March, because whenever it's getting closed down, we went live with them with a number of big European luxury brands, right? So we've done it now for the whole spring. So we kind of know, we have a best practice document, what you need to do, and kind of how setting up with a video call, and also being, like, sharing your line sheets, kind of doing all to be able to walk through the product that you're showing. So I think people are, you just know it's not going to be as optimal as otherwise, but at the same point, like, you do what you have to do, and you are kind of resetting, because what's the alternative, right?
Right.
So, but I think that the forced development, I generally say, like, we've come 5 years in development in 2 months' time, which is, it's a very painful Band-Aid to rip off, right? But at the same point, it's something where, like, it was bound to happen, like, in some way, shape, or form. I think the gradual one, I think everybody would have preferred it, but at the same point, there are positives coming with this too. Even if it's super painful at this point, there will be positives coming out the other side too.
And what are the positives? I was just going to ask you. Well, can we list some of the positive developments that are happening right now?
I thought you knew, but I'll talk about it. I think you've read as much as I have before, where it's back to travel, right? I think fashion industry. I think you mentioned in one of your podcasts where it's I think it's like 150 billion garments made every year, and a third of them are never used or something. That on top of then all, like, there's lots of travel too, like all the travel every time, everywhere. Like, I think we all have a responsibility kind of to look at our carbon footprint. Like I said, I think people will be much more conscious about that. And here's a way to, maybe you don't need to all the time. You can make good decisions anyway. Like, as long as you have the right data and the right kind of platforms to work off of. And I'm not just giving us a plug here. It's kind of for everything, right? So I think that'll be good. And I think also, if I look at overall, the problem that retail is in right now, with huge amounts of unused inventory that they're going to have to kind of flow along, right? There's one part that comes, like, you will basically, hopefully, then automatically slide into like the buy now, wear now part, right? Where like you come with like,
Right.
okay, when are people going to want new spring garments or spring deliveries? Not in December. It's going to be like in February, March, when it actually is spring, right? When you actually have, we can come into having stuff that people want in the time they want it versus having it 3 months ahead of time and then discounting it mid-season, which becomes, why would I then buy it in the beginning of the season? Or if I can wait till the end to mid-season to buy something, if it's still cold or still warm, versus if you actually go on sale when it's about to end, that's actually more healthy in the end, at the end of the day. So I think that's something I'm looking forward to, because I think the if you just look at this is affecting everybody from like supply, from manufacturing to last mile delivery, right? So as I always looked at before, was like the bigger problem was always in the supply chain. Like there was always brands always had a desire to do it, but they couldn't because manufacturing dictated when they could produce. So then that's kind of the cycle as it was. But now everybody is disrupted. So then it can kind of become a natural change, which I hope will stay that way, and people will look at it differently, right? But then overlaying then also a better buying process, and not just rather than buying and building in the fact that you won't be able to sell everything, you're going to have to go on discount, just buy a little bit less and then sell it better in that case, right?
Right.
And I do think also, the dependence on those like massive seasonal drops, it's a super risky business to have. You're betting your company twice a year on, and you have massive outstanding cash like for long periods of time, versus I think now going into more of a monthly or mini seasons or mini drops, I think will be better at the end of the day.
I'm really curious about sorry, fashion sort of self-esteem, going through this and onwards, because I really feel like, obviously travel industry hit hard, but I think everyone's sort of waiting to get back on at least leisurely travel. We're dying to see the world again, or visit a al fresco dinner in Paris or something like that. Whereas fashion, in a way, and we sort of, that was like the first thing we all cut away from our lives. And it kind of got a bad rap, but I'm curious because just the other day there was this uprising on the business of fashion, where a large part of the fashion industry were calling for like a new sort of schedule, and some of the things that you're talking about now. Obviously the fast fashion giants and the big luxury conglomerates were absent from that. But I'm curious about how fashion will sort of retake its ground in a way, or will it? Will there be some I don't know. My question is a bit vague here, but there's something to fashion that it needs to sort of reclaim its position in a way. What do you think?
Yeah, but I think it's also it's the reimagining of what it can be, right? I think it's something where it's an industry that's been living the way it's been living because it's been living like that, not because it wanted to. It's just a matter of it's like that. So it's kind of just like grown into, well, this is how we always did it. This is when the old seasons always were. Okay, why? So now you can question it why. It becomes back to more, and unfortunately, you just look at like the drop off. I think I heard something today where for, I think April, apparel and retail sales were down something like, apparel sales in retail specifically was down something like 80% in April, which is insane, right? For the US, where all over retail was down by 16, which is, that in itself is pretty crazy. But I think that people just look and say, what am I buying and why? So in that case, if you can come back to the quality, come back to the craftsmanship, because if you're buying something, you want to have something that you really want to have versus have it just because. So I think, I don't know, it's a very hard question to say how to reclaim anything, but at the same point, like people still need clothes. They still want to look and feel good, right? I think you've been sporting your at-home outfits, which I've been, jealous of, because I don't have my wardrobe here at all, but not that I have one like you, I won't say that, but there is the part, like, you just feel a different way if you put on an outfit. You want to have something you feel confident or cozy or whatever it is you want to feel. Like, clothing is a big part of it. So I think that I'm looking forward to brands finding their voice again, like real voices, versus just kind of doing like being a Me Too brand, or just doing, here's another white T-shirt. All right, well, why are you making a white T-shirt? What's it about? Like, it's kind of like having more of that rather than just like, I'm just going to cram out a bunch of stuff in the market. That, I think, is the thing that kind of brings it back in that case, where it's more of call it like the allure of the early brand building, like 60s and 70s and stuff, where you built like a real brand, and that it shows it's difficult to build a brand, but at least like now you can. There's a part where you can actually start as an opportunity to build something new. If you can come out of this other side, like that's, I think now you have, if there's ever an opportunity to experiment with anything, experiment with whatever you want to right now. It doesn't matter, right? Nobody's going to blame you for anything.
Now,
right?
Have you seen from a business perspective, you can answer this as broadly and as specifically as you want, but have you seen, are there certain types of brands that are doing better than others? And are there certain brands that are really we're not gonna see anymore, after this?
I mean, I think like the athletic wear brands, like those, like more, if I look at like in the US, there's one like Roan, for instance, which is a great brand that it's a shameless plug, I use them. But I mean, they're doing it something like, if you're at home, people are doing workouts at home. You're still doing that. Like, so it's a part like where you're actually using it in your everyday life. I think they're doing, reasonably well considering the circumstances. I think all that category, if you just get that category, is doing reasonably well. I think it's more the ones that are just like, I don't know, it's another T-shirt, another short, another pant, like whatever that is, where it's not necessarily, it doesn't really have its own brand identity. I think those are going to have a hard time. And then, so I mean, unfortunately, we will likely see a number of brands disappearing, which is unfortunate, obviously, from a personal perspective for those brands. But at the same point, from the business, like there's way many brands in the business. And as you know, also, that's kind of the thing where like it's a 5-year cycle happening in a couple of months. And that's, as bad as it is, it still opens up for opportunity for new brands to come in and fill voids and actually do the real branding work around them. So I'm positive about that, because I think like most of, like, if you look at like the big, like the Ubers and Airbnbs came out of the last financial crisis when people just had time, right? So you start to think of, what else do I want to do? And some of the fashion brands too. So maybe we're up for a new growth here, hopefully.
So have you doubled down on your running gear while in quarantine?
I haven't actually bought a new. I had some right before, but I think I'm going to have to get some new, because now it's a lot of running happening.
Yeah.
So got to do that.
So talk to me about the sort of this issue about direct to consumer versus wholesale, because obviously this is an issue that I'm sure you're thinking a lot about, given the service that you provide, and I think the sort of, in a way, the sort of easy analysis even before the pandemic was like, where brands have to go direct to consumer. They have to sell directly to their audience. But I suspect that it's not so simple in terms of just reaching the audience or getting, especially in a big market like the US.
Well, but I mean, I think what was evident before was that you saw most direct-to-consumer brands were then starting to get into wholesale. They're starting to get into their own retail, because at the end of the day, at least at that time, we'll see how it changes now, but the customer acquisition cost was very, very high. Like you couldn't just keep on spending online and make a profitable customer out of that. So I think, and I'm not, don't quote me on this. I mean, obviously it's now here on video, but even so, I think I saw numbers before where because of the lack of ad spending, even keywords online and price, right? So the cost around that is dropping. So there might be a resurgence then for at least for a period of time to be able to go after customers online. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think there's still like the part where it's the healthy mix of channels. If you were 99% wholesale at this point, not so good, right? If you're 99% e-commerce, obviously now it's better to be way overweight on that. But if you had at least like half to 2/3 own channels and a third on wholesale, that's probably what you wanted to have as a brand. Because I mean, at the end of the day, you have to have some control of your own voice, your own story. But wholesale still is like, even it's more. I mean, it's more the curation to the customer to be able to introduce somebody to a brand. Like I mean, a company like Nordstrom is still going to be bigger than you as a brand most times, right? So it's still an important channel. I think it's just a part of, you just have to know why you're going there and what you're, as a brand, like, what is it, what's your goal with it, and then figure out, like, because you still, it's always important to communicate to your customer directly. You're the brand, so you're supposed to do that.
How do you advise brands, or where do you see sort of content going in terms of how brands should communicate, either both with the consumer but also with their wholesale customers? I mean, through your platform and other platforms. How do you see any trends there, or any type of movement in terms of, digital content that needs to be produced to reach out more?
I mean, I think right now, like, more rich formats, right? Video will be something, and even like this, like if you look at Instagram TV, something where you kind of bring out more of that, where you can talk to your audience in almost like an informal setting as well. I think that's growing. I think it's something that's been there for a while, and it's going to keep going. But I do think, things like, 360 pictures, videos, like on a product level, I think those are just more and more important. Like, if I'm just speaking just on the B2B setting, like you have to show your product in the best possible light. Then towards the consumers too, if you can't come to the store, you can't see it. Like, you have to do so much and be I think you have to know so much more about your customer, what they actually react to. And like I said before, I think this is the time when people experiment and try, with their customers, do A/B testing on what works, and try to figure that out. It's easier said than done, obviously, but it's still something that people you need to do, like know where your customer is.
So let's talk about sustainability. Everyone in the fashion industry's favorite subject. As you mentioned before, I love to throw this number around. 150 billion garments produced every year. Somewhere along the lines of a third of those is never even reaching the consumer. Obviously, this poses a huge problem for all of us to tackle. And I've always been advocating for technology as a way to solve this, because obviously if we can just decrease that third of of all the garments that are being produced, and that is like supply and demand, right? We have to level that somehow. Where do you see that going, and what do you obviously you can plug your own service or just a general view of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I have had many conversations about that too, and that was my favorite thing as well. Where it's some part. This is not to throw every retailer under the bus, but lots of even brands, you're making decisions, you're guessing, like saying, okay, cool, I'm gonna make 1,000 jackets, and here's the size split. Okay, like, who's actually buying it? It's really that part to integrate data, which is also easier said than done, because there's tons of data out there, but it's very, very hard to translate it into actionable information, right? So what does it mean? Like, right, like if I have it, even specifically for small to mid-sized companies, like there's so much information that may as well not be any information, because you're not making any decisions based on it anyway. So I think it's really it's the medium of getting in tools that can work for you. And sure, is it still going to be some sort of gut feel? There probably should be too, because you don't want to have a computer just like deciding everything. But some parts, like, sizing and volume and stuff like that, still not a gut. Like, you need to have that, like, as some part of your model. I do think I read the other day where I think everybody's looking more for decisions closer to market, right? Where you're getting, like, versus, I mean, like, now we're making decisions 6 months at a time. You don't know what it's going to be like. Like, in February, what's it going to be like in July? What's going to happen? I mean, clearly this year is one of those. But I think I think being able to do shorter runs, right, in terms of production, and yes, that might cost more, but at the same point, if your cash flow is not outstanding that long, it's better. Like, shorter runs and more often is going to be a better model at the end of the day. Like, it's just like it might be something, you might take a little hit on margins, but cash flow is the biggest problem in this industry anyway. So I feel like that's the part to kind of address. And then if you don't have to make those enormous gambles twice a year, then hopefully you'll be able to produce better that's more in tune with consumer demand, and then obviously you wouldn't be as wasteful in terms of your production in that case. I think a lot of the production is about, I mean, not speaking for fast fashion, but I'm sure it's similar, where it's about production minimums and costs and stuff like that, where like the cost it's almost a fallacy, where if you look at the item cost, but yeah, fine, you produced 10,000 garments, you only sold like 6,000. I mean, there's a cost to those 4, right? So it's a portion. They're looking at the full cycle of a garment would be interesting. I mean, just looking at the full cycle of a collection to be able to see it that way. So, I mean, I think, we have a lot of, there's lots of, I mean, I think from sustainability, I think there'll be much more of that's going to be like more of a table stakes where people have to have that, not because just to sell, but people will be requiring that of their brands to know, like, okay, you have to be transparent. Like, what is your production like, and what do you do? And not doing this tacking on, like, hey, we're doing the sustainability thing. Well, like, it has to be actually be genuine, which is difficult if you're not in the game already. But that's something that's going to have to happen. But I think the production is the big thing, right? Just like in production and production planning, that's where it comes in.
You mentioned before that we, going into this year, we thought it would be the problems would be issues of supply, especially in terms of production from Asia and China. What's the discussion? What has the discussion been in the States? I haven't followed that. Is there more talk about bringing back production to the States, or?
Some. I think it's more like diversifying your supply chain. I think everybody's been like so dominant on one country, which is obviously, it's kind of like being dependent on one customer as well. Like, you can't. It's not something. It works until it doesn't work, and when it doesn't work, it really doesn't work, right?
Right.
So I think there's a lot more kind of, there's movement to South America. There's yes, other South Asian countries as well, but also there's some movement for opening some factories in the U.S. But that also comes back to, like, what's the customer willing to pay at the end of the day, and our practice of the margins part of the business it's a very weird one, and then. I think it becomes difficult. Like, there's been such a movement, like, made in America, for instance, but at the end of the day, they didn't want to pay the price for it. So that didn't really work. Like, it's still happening, but it's not at the volume where people need it.
Let's talk a little bit about your background to get people introduced to where you're coming from, because obviously you're a fellow Swede. You haven't lived in Sweden for quite some time. You've been at NuOrder now for, is it a year now, or it's less than a year?
It's 4 months.
All right.
Yeah, I think it's my 4-month anniversary last week. So there you go.
Okay, so most of it spent in quarantine then.
Exactly. I had a month of real life, and then disappeared. My background is, I think I usually say here in the US, it's like, it's, what do you call it? It's unconventional background for fashion, because I didn't spend my whole life in fashion. I did a business background first, consulting, and then moved to the US 14 years ago now. Yeah, it's been 14 years now. Moved for business school to go to Columbia in New York, and went through there and actually got out, did restructuring and turnaround consulting, started in 2008. So 2 weeks before Lehman Brothers went down, I was on that side of the industry. So interesting times. And then, was afforded a fantastic opportunity about 3 years later to take on the Swedish brand J.Lindeberg in the US. They're buying out a joint venture. So I took over the company there and started to build the organization and build it in the US for about 4 years, which is a fantastic journey. I mean, for somebody that was going headfirst into fashion, which is interesting. You get to see everything that's like issues and, the life that is a very difficult life for, small to mid-sized companies. It's a very difficult environment, but I mean, it's super interesting. Then I got to go from there to, we were a customer of a project, the trade show Product, which is part of Magic, like the biggest trade shows in the world. And they approached me and asked if I wanted to run menswear, which was unreal for me because, again, didn't really come from fashion. But I got to then kind of jump into being in the middle of everything, which is fun. Working with all the media houses, the retailers and the brands, and putting on these. They are pretty enormous. It's an enormous environment with so many brands and so many retailers. You just get to, being part of it is very interesting, I think. And it's a very, very special kind of an environment, I think. And made very good friends there. Met you as part of that too. There, like when you guys were launching Scandinavian Man, was very early in my tenure there.
Right.
And then that was, I think, was that Pity? I think it was.
It's Pity. We met the first time at Pity. That was before I started Scandinavian Man. So,
it was exactly.
Yeah.
That was the weirdest part. I got featured through you at Plaza One, where like, so what was it, like the top 30 cool people in the US? I'm like, this is not me.
Exactly. That was the first connection.
That was like, listen, you brought me to the world. It was good. No, yeah. So then after that, I went to I was there for about 2 years, 2.5 years, and then I went into my own to do consulting, which I did
Mm,
for about
mm,
2 years, which was interesting. I worked on kind of anything and everything, like from kind of brands to investors to technology companies as well, to kind of just to kind of look around. I also for a moment was looking at a kind of a new retail concept too, which timing wise was probably pretty good. It didn't start, but it's still something where I see the new retail models that will come up out of this will be very interesting to see. But
mm.
yeah, so then I was approached in November here to look at NuOrder, really, to kind of see like what could be done here and if I could add some value. And we all agreed that maybe that was a choice, that was a chance. And so I was very happy to take a new step and kind of get into, I mean, the part that I talked to about was what was the fashion technology part, which is one part I launched with the project pretty early, was, kind of try to integrate fashion companies with, technology companies with the fashion community. Because one thing I think that technology companies often do, it's engineers meeting creatives, which is not easy, right? That part where you think it's going to be, hey, my solution is the best, therefore you should use it. And there's other criteria that if you're in fashion that you probably evaluate against. And you're not that you're not understanding the problems, but it's still like you have different criteria that you're looking at. So that part was very much a passion project of mine. So I'm happy that's when like it's coming full circle there to kind of to be back, to be in this, like the intersection of technology and fashion, which I think is interesting.
It's
That was a
super
very
interesting.
long-winded background.
No, I think we needed that for to deepen the conversation, because and exactly what you're talking about right now is also what I'm obsessed with in terms of where I want to take my own platform, and because I think there's this great need to bridge these two worlds and bring them together.
Yeah.
I think, both in terms of fashion and the sort of lifestyle sector needs to, obviously this era has forced a lot of them to adapt and sort of accelerate their tech skills from just having Zoom conference to thinking about their supply chain and all that, but also the world of tech and I think there are a lot of tech companies, and I'm not from the world of tech, so this is sort of a learning curve for me. But the way I kind of view it from the outside is there's much to be learned from fashion or food or music or these sort of in sort of building cultural based brands in a way. Has that been
Mm-hmm.
your experience as well? And two-part question: would you consider NuOrder a tech company when you arrived at it, or what was the
Oh yeah.
situation there?
No, very much a tech company.
Mm,
NuOrder, I think it's a tech company in its core, but I mean it's been within fashion for a good while, right?
right.
Um, but even so, I think that there's a portion that, like, where the other tech companies I work with, like there's a portion that almost to translate, right? To translate what the technology actually means and where the pain points are. Because I think some parts, I looked at a lot of technology companies a couple of years ago where a lot of them are engineering products, fantastic, but they don't solve the problem, right? And you have to see, like, what is that actual problem that is, like, what's the top of mind for people? And you kind of need to be in the know of, specifically if you're looking at fashion or retail, for instance, you need to kind of be in the know of what is that problem, and is this really relevant? Like, there might be something else, a nice to have, but I have bigger problems, and then you have to figure out what is that my solution? Is it somebody else's? Like, I think there's a portion there where that's where I feel like for a very long time they've been speaking two different languages,
Mm,
and so there's a portion to kind of say, okay, what A, knowing what's going on in fashion, and B, okay, then what are the solutions that could potentially be something. And I think that was like, from the founder's perspective, like back in 2011 when this started, they walked to trade show and saw people writing on pen and paper and having those
yeah.
copy sheets and faxing. And they're like, this is 2011, and I thought the same thing when the first time I came to J.Lindeberg and going to the trade show. I'm like, what is happening here? Like, we have email, we have the internet. Like,
Mm.
think about it. There should be better ways to do this, but it's the part where, like, it's an industry that's been set in its ways for a long time, and so that's the part where I think it's an interesting place to be now because of the technology disruption that will happen in fashion and elsewhere too. But I think fashion will be forced to take on new platforms, new thinking, and if you can be in that intersection to help guide, right? I think that's an interesting place to be at this point.
What what's the main thing you have to sort of, let's generalize here, but what's the main thing you have to teach a tech person about the world of fashion?
Well, I mean, some parts it's like, what is the pain point? Like, how does what's the day to day of a salesperson, like of a fashion sales executive? What do they deal with? Like, what are the things you deal with process wise? Like, how is it hard to deal with a major versus a specialty store versus, how do you do? It's really all that process part, like just understand like what that pain point is. Like, obviously for us, there's a good fit of what we do into the process, but I think there's lots of things to say. Okay, that there are things that you can guide in terms of what's. I think everybody needs. You almost need like war stories, right? It's kind of like where people go, because it's very. I mean, this is a very relationship driven business, and everybody's had some deal go wrong, or you remember when that jacket was canceled, or whatever. Like, color didn't come out right, and what do we do? And there are things that you're just like, oh, okay, that like this person understands my everyday life, or understands my world. Because I think if you have more confidence in that, you'll be able to get more service from that kind of person, right? I mean, right or wrong. in a way, but I mean, as long as you have a product that a technology solution that will be valuable. I mean, that's the base mark. Like, that, okay, whatever we have will give a positive ROI. There'll be something that'll be better. Like, I'll improve your life. I'll give you time back, which is also one of the Scott Galloway things. Like, it's time is the precious commodity. If I give you time back, that is going to be worth something for you, right? So I remember when we did at J.Lindeberg, I think I shortened the time for like order closure. Like, we had to, when I started, we had to close down orders for a long while until we can get them in. And I took that from a week to an hour just by using one of these, like the solution, where it's like, that's how you close it out. So that gives you time back, or gives you time to do more orders and do that. So I think in a sense, it just becomes like, you kind of almost have to walk a day in somebody else's shoes, virtually or whatever, and then you can kind of figure it out. Right.
Right. Oh, that's fascinating. And from the flip side, in terms of teaching fashion people of technology, is there a general observation there?
I mean, up until now, resistance was everything, right?
Right.
but I think there's a portion where, like, it depends on when you were. I think sometimes it could be seen as a threat, right? If you looked at like from where like this is going to replace me, we have to look at it's going to enhance me. That's the thing. Like, it's going to enhance what I do. It's not about replacing. Like, if you can be replaced by a robot, then perhaps there's something you should look at what you're doing, right? It's like, you shouldn't be able to be like one-on-one replaced. Like, I mean, there's portions of it you can be, but if you're looking in fashion, if it's where that's creative, or if it's just the relationships in terms of doing sales or whatever it is, there's a value you bring as a human being. Can it be augmented and enhanced by systems and tools? Of course. Like the tools, like, if I don't have to keep something in my head, I can focus on what I'm good at. Great. That's what I want to do. So I think that's been my sense of the general kind of like mistrust, because the narrative has just been such, right? Where it's been like, oh, AI or machine learning will take over the world. It's like, I mean, with somebody else's guidance and being there, then yeah, it's going to be a great tool. But I don't see it really like for what we're specifically talking about. I don't think it'll take it over like fully. It's going to be something where it's going to be a great enhancement to help us do make less wasteful decisions, and kind of be better at understanding our customer. That's where you have to look at it as the positives, I think. I think that was like pre-COVID. That was my part. I think now everyone's like, all right, cool. Let's look at technology. Like, what is it? Right. And I mean, you're like, this technology thing seems good. The internet, what's that? Right. Where you're the openness to look at new things is totally different, because you have to. And I think you realize also because if you just look at like where any tools that enhance your process, that's great, because your secret sauce as a brand or as a retailer is not how you do things. It's not like how good your CFO is. It's like what you actually curate to your customer and talking to your customers. It's really sales and marketing as a brand is, in essence, that's your lifeline, right? It's not exactly how you do your order management. That you should do it really well, but that's not really what's going to help.
It's not a USP that the customers think about at all, right?
No, nobody starts a brand saying like, I'm super good at buying. Like, I'm super good at, like, that's what I'm the best at. Like, all right, great. Right. But what about selling? I find that to be, I think it's interesting where that's coming to fruition now, where people are not like, people be happy to use the same platform as somebody else, because if somebody
Mm.
else uses it, okay, that's probably pretty good, and then I can focus on, creating great experiences and great moments and great product for my customer, my end
Mm.
customer, because that's really
Mm.
what puts money in your bank anyway.
Mm. So going into this new role, and you have a fascinating background because you've worked at so many different types of areas of the fashion industry, moving from like a brand to the trade show area, and being consulting with brands and so forth. Was there something specific you brought from past experience into the role at NuOrder, and that wasn't there that you know?
I think it's, I mean, like, it's that, what, that je ne sais quoi, right? Where you have like this, like, I mean, it's really like you bring in all your experiences. And so
Right.
having both from the business side and, coming from a very quantitative field like finance and
Mm.
consulting,
Mm.
to bring in, what I loved about fashion was really bringing what I call like this, bringing together the rational logic of business with the irrational of fashion and arts. It's a fantastic place to be. It's super
Mm.
difficult, but it's super fun to be as well. And I think just like bringing in some of that logic in terms of how the market works and what's hard and what's not, and then combining it with everything else I've done. I think it's hard to put a finger on something specific, but clearly, like the fashion background mixed with the business background
Mm.
makes an impact.
I'm going to take one last wing at the same question, but because I find it fascinating that you work with the trade show, which is
Mm-hmm.
it's really one of the oldest models of trading goods between people. I think I don't know how
Sure.
many hundred years old it is, but and
Yeah.
now you're at the company where it's an innovation that's just a few years old. Um, was there something from this the old model of the trade show that you brought with you specifically that wasn't in the tech part of NuOrder's service?
Yeah. I mean, but I think you look at, from the trade show part, you get an understanding for the flow of the industry. I
Mm.
think there's there's portions that are frustrating. There's portions that are really good. So you just look at that, like, kind of bring it here. I think you look at like everything you do is like a platform. Like you basically are a platform for most things. You have to look at what's the strength of my platform. And, for a wholesale, for a trade show, you're marketing and sales, like marketing and curation. That's where your real strength is.
Mm.
And we look, I mean, our technology is our strength, like that's what we are, but it's part of just understanding why do the brands use trade shows, like what's interesting for them, like, and how do they work with it. I think just bringing that along has been interesting, just to have, because I mean, I know it's the B2B world. That's what I lived in for a while. Like, so I know that, and you can know how difficult it is for different people to work with, and how sometimes frustrating trade shows can be, and how great they can be sometimes. Like, you just know, like, what is that part, and how can you take some of those experiences and kind of make it into either our platform or different partnerships, like whatever we do, to see like how can we enhance what we do to make it a better world for the brands and the retailers.
Mm.
Was that a good answer, or was it just like me rambling?
It might have been both. We'll see once we listen to this again and see the ratio of
You'll have to
likes
cut it out in post.
flowing into this episode. No. I
Yes.
think it's really interesting, and it's so interesting to go sort of in depth on it, and just the issue of bridging sort of fashion and lifestyle and technology and innovation. And I think there's a real need for it, and I think it's important to look at it pretty granular and see what you need to bring with you and what you can actually leave behind in a way.
Yeah.
Um,
I think one thing that I think is interesting now too is seeing what's happening. There's a movement called like Brands for Better in the U.S., which is, I think, it's a coalition of like 50 direct-to-consumer brands have come together, and they gave a
okay.
proceed. They committed a proceed of their sales to COVID-19 related charities. And some of them are competing with each other, but they still, like, it's a part that is coming together as a community, which I think is interesting.
Mm.
Because I always thought, like, before, where if you talk about like the word lifestyle, for instance, like what does that really mean? I think if you look at like one of the problems for people or brands to get to consumers is everybody's going after the same consumer. Like at this moment, like there's probably like 100 companies going after you. They're all individually putting in like lots of marketing dollars. So you're walking around like with a big price tag on your head, right? Whereas there's a person that you can
I
actually,
think if you're an editor working in fashion, the sense is that there's more than 100 companies coming after me. at any given
Fair.
moment.
Fair. But I think my point being just like there's a portion to consider, like, are there collaborations to do even outside of
Right.
fashion? Like, if I'm a fashion brand, maybe Volvo's going after that same customer. Maybe there's like a liquor brand, whatever. Just like looking for those partnerships to kind of to basically leverage your marketing budgets to really make the best experience for everybody. And then and also not being afraid of even sometimes teaming up with people that are essentially competing with you, because very, very few people want to be dressed in one brand only, unless you work for that brand, right? That's kind of there. Otherwise, you start to curate and put together your own look. And you want to be those, listen, like these jeans work with that shirt, work with that jacket. Those are things you want to know. So there is the part to just start to have a little bit more openness and not be too close-minded with who you're talking to or who you're working with.
I think on top of that, there's also the issue of sort of digital assets. And if you look at it long term, how will we view fashion? If I look at my 9-year-old daughter, obviously to style interested parents, obviously she has a good wardrobe, but when she is hanging out with her friends and when she's asking for how to spend her allowance, she wants to buy digital things, and pretty often it's the equivalent of clothes. There's some kind of vanity thing of something she wants within these world of Roblox and Fortnite or whatever it is. That's it's the equivalent of fashion, because it's something that she wants to have in her possession and wear or project when she's meeting her friends in these digital worlds. So I think that's also going to be a really interesting development if you look at a few years ahead, to see, can fashion play another role, or is it perhaps already playing another role? It's just that the traditional fashion industry is not a player in it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, I mean, as we're talking about, I mean, I have that same experience with my kids too, where like, they buy the most weird skins and stuff. You're like, why did you actually spend money on that? And it makes them feel good, which is the same way why you spend money on clothes, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like if you're buying that special jacket or whatever it is, like that makes you feel good. And I think, as we go back to more of a normal social interaction, I think it'll translate to, I mean, because they still live in the real world, but they can say, okay, you can kind of, do I think it matters? Like, should Gucci do a skin for Roblox? Probably not. Right? That's probably not. I mean, who knows? But I think that's not necessarily what we should be focused on. But I think it's interesting. But I think it's interesting how the understanding for fashion comes in from a digital means like that versus just which T-shirt should I wear and what should I do. I mean, I think there's still. I think my daughter and my son are different. My son spends like all of his allowance on Roblox, but my daughter, she just saves, but she likes to dress up sometimes. She puts on a dress. It's cool, right? So you start to find your own little flow.
It plays into what you spoke about before. It's like, is Gucci competing with Volvo, or is Volvo competing with Gucci in terms of my wallet and my attention and my sort of how I build my lifestyle? I think certainly we're seeing, here in Scandinavia, the sort of rise of all these outdoor brands that are getting both sort of credibility and I'll play a larger part in people's lives. And that's, perhaps money that would be spent on sneakers, and now you're going in the outdoors, and that's essentially that's lifestyle, right?
Yep. No, for sure. I mean, I think my point is also where like they're competing for your attention from different angles. Like one is a car, one is clothes. Like they can actually combine some forces too, and they don't have to spend as much, right? So there's a portion there. I think, I do think the part, like it seems, there's some very good Swedish brands in the outdoor sector. I mean, Haglöfs being one of them is a really good one. They do a fantastic job, just like their lifestyle, right? They're like showing like most of their pictures. I would like to live that way. I can't, but I would like to. So I think that's coming more too. I think
running in the snow in Tahoe is pretty close to idyllic outdoor lifestyle. So I think you're way ahead.
I'm like, Haglöfs, holler at me.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So what you're saying is basically brands that are perhaps competing or adjacent in terms of providing different types of products but they're actually targeting the same consumer, same lifestyle, they should be
Mm-hmm.
collaborating more.
Yeah, I mean, which I think we saw in all the different collaboration movements over the last couple of years. Which I want to hear from you. I wonder how what's your thought on that? I'll ask you that question in terms of collaborations going forward. But I mean, my point being that maybe you don't start with your competitors. You start probably with the ones that are complementary to you, where like that's the lifestyle that you're projecting with your brand goes well with that brand or that drink or that restaurant or that airline, that location. There's so many things you can build up just by having a good persona for what your customer does. Have a couple of different, 10, 20, 30 different personas and say, well, for this persona, we should probably collaborate with that one. So you can kind of build a strategy for that, which I think is an interesting one. I'll flip it around on you too, like in terms of, because I always felt before we went into there was so many collaborations where you wonder what a brand really was, like unless they were somebody else. What's your thought on that? I'll throw it back to you.
I think we are moving into an era of collaboration as a whole. I think it will only increase. I think there's probably you can count a few collaborations in the world of fashion that were perhaps not as good, or what were they thinking and so forth. But I think when it's like 1 + 1 becomes 3 or 4 or 5, it's not going to go away. And I think there are just so benefits, especially I think if in old times you had this sort of well curated shop which you perhaps went to because you knew the people in the store and you knew that they took care of curating the products. If that's not happening in physical retail and perhaps not in digital retail as much, perhaps the brands need to do it themselves. They need to sort of congregate in areas where they can provide value for their customers, or reach out to other customer groups. So I have a hard time seeing that will disappear.
I think it's more the innovation part around it. I mean, I actually love the one, I think it was Acne and Fjällräven did one, which is pretty cool. Like those are, I mean, there's some where like, all right, that makes sense and it's cool. Like it's something that's different. It adds to both brands. And then some could be somewhat lazy. It's just like it's tacking on a brand that makes either you big brand a little bit cooler or the small brand a little bit bigger. All right, cool. But there are lots of brands that do a really, really good job with it. But I think it's just more like I think there has to be something genuine in it, which I mean that's probably going to go forward too. There'll be unfortunately less brands around, but the ones that are around, I think will have a better sense of who they need to work with and do that. Which I think at the end of the day it comes down to your efficiency of your marketing dollars in that case as well. Right.
Yeah. So you've been out on the West Coast now for 2.5 months. You've been living in New York for 14 years. What do you miss most about New York?
I do miss. I miss the parts that are right now gone. Right. It's the life. Right. It's kind of being the people. It's being there in restaurants, even the subway. Right. Even the subway is an interesting cross section of life. I think I miss that. And obviously, if you follow me on Instagram, I have a certain picture I take at the park every morning when I run. So yes, I do miss that too. There's so many things about New York that I miss, just like that. The energy that's there, you can't quite replace it. I mean, here we're up in the mountains. There's, in terms of energy, not here, but very different energy. Like different with the views are amazing. But New York is still New York. It's still home to me.
Right. I see some people picking up sort of gardening or knitting or different type of hobbies. What have you picked up during these times?
I mean, hobbies, not so much, but I mean, I'm actually working out more now.
Right.
Other things I used to just do running, but now I do more kind of like, do some at home workouts, which has been really good. I'm in very good shape now, which is nice. So that's been a good thing. But I also do a lot of, I do love cooking as well. So I do cooking with my daughter. We do cooking. We make kanelbullar, Swedish cinnamon rolls just yesterday. And I like that. That's kind of therapeutic too, just to kind of do something like that and kind of take the time to make something special. And it's, my daughter loves to do it too. So she gets to mix and we do that. It's really pretty cool. So it's a part to kind of like, I think you want to have something you're active with that's not just work or anything, because you can get kind of lazy, just go from work to TV to bed, and that becomes very monotonous. Right. So, especially now.
Are you watching anything, reading anything, listening to anything that you really want to recommend or that you haven't listened to before?
What am I listening to? A lot of news podcasts, I'll tell you that
Right.
much. But I like to listen to, when I'm running, I listen to podcasts mainly. So I listen to, obviously, the Scandinavian Man podcast before. Looking forward to the next iteration too. Blamo is a great one too. I haven't listened to yours there yet, but I have to listen to it. Yours and Jeremy's.
Came out today.
There you go. So I have another time. Otherwise, I gotta say, like, Netflix has done a fantastic job of getting like new content out. We just finished. I don't know if you have it in the Swedish, but like Hollywood,
Yeah.
Hollywood
Yeah.
story.
I haven't seen it
super
yet.
good.
Yeah.
Super good. So I like those, and just to kind of having just like something, just to kind of to take your mind off things is nice. I do that often. And then I read, was it Lynn Ullman's or her tribute to Ingmar Bergman. Just happened to get it from my mom. Just read it. It was pretty good.
So the daughter of Ingmar Bergman. Oh, one of the daughters.
Yeah.
One of the
Yes,
many
one of
children of Ingmar Bergman's.
Yes, indeed. That was good. Yes, I gotta, it's not terribly exciting outside of this. Like we try to get out as a family to go out and see, as we're out here, we should really make use of the nature that's here, because it's quite spectacular. So we try to do that. And then, I don't know about you, but I've become, weirdly enough, like almost closer with my family now, because we have, my parents are, my brother and my sister are in Sweden, and we have a weekly Zoom call. We have a coffee. I have a coffee because it's 9 a.m. and it's 6 p.m. there, but we all get together and talk. And then I have that with some friends as well. It's kind of fun. It's just like it's nice. It doesn't quite replace like the human interaction, but at the same point, like it's you get something out of it, and it's kind of fun. It's kind of an interesting thing to do too.
Yeah. No, I've had that for sure, and also just. Because people around the world, and people even in the same city that have very different. I think that's just one of the things about this time, that people are going through such different types of experiences. So I think even just meeting someone in the office, you meet someone in the office, feels like you have sort of the same experience every day. But now people are living in very different, apartments. And for sure, one of the things to have a family, which is sort of to have your own little social universe to be around every day, and hopefully it's I'm happily to have a good one. It's I'm super grateful for that, because a lot of people are struggling with loneliness and just tackling that whole thing.
Yeah, for sure.
So how's the stand-up career doing?
Wondering when that was going to come. It's been dormant for the last 2 years. I need to pick it up again, but who knows what's going to happen now. Stand-up clubs are known to be super tightly packed, so I don't know. Yeah. I do miss going to them, and I miss doing them too, because it was a fantastic experience. As much as I always question myself the 30 seconds before going on, it's like, why am I doing this again? But it's such a great experience, both as a performer, but also as an audience. I really hope that will come back sometime very, very soon, because it's such a great medium. But all hats off to everybody who can do that, like, professionally, because it's super difficult. I'm by no means even close to that. It's super fun. It's such a creative outlet, but it is difficult. It's very difficult. It's
right.
Yeah. But yeah, I did a bunch of shows in New York, so I've done New York, the New York scene. I've done a couple of them, so it's been fun.
Have you learned anything about yourself, or yourself as a professional doing stand-up comedy?
Well, not terribly terrified about public speaking anymore, right? There's a portion where, like, speaking in front of people is a very different one from speaking in front of like 60 strangers who need to laugh within 15 seconds.
Right.
That is a tough one, right? So I went into that. It was a couple of years ago. I decided to do at least one thing a year that was out of my wheelhouse, that would just challenge myself in terms of just like, putting myself up to a new challenge that was totally different, which it's something I'd always nurtured.
Well, so you did several things. What else did you do?
The year before that, I did improv comedy. I did a week I did an intensive course at UCB, so Upstanding Citizens Brigade in New York, which was great. Which ended with like a show, which is also terrifying, but it was super fun. Like improv, I did a little bit of that in Sweden like years ago, just like half a semester or something, but it was super fun. also super nerve wracking. Then the year before that, which is not quite, I did a year before I did a week of French cooking at the Culinary Arts Institute of New York, which is fun too. That was not nerve wracking, but improv and then stand up, that was different, but it was super cool. I highly recommend. I do recommend if you can to do something totally out of your wheelhouse, like at least once a year, once every other year, do it. And you learn a lot just by doing something that's very different from where you're expanding your comfort zone. I think you grow somewhat as a person from that.
So was getting the mustache one of those things that you?
The mustache was it was an experience. It was actually from last year. We were actually here in Tahoe August, and there was like some sort of country and western night, and I used to sport a beard, not unlike yours. And my daughter's like, you should have a mustache for this. I'm like, sure. So I did that, and I was like, you know what? Not half bad. And then posted it, got all kinds of accolades. Not for my wife, interesting enough, but my daughter's a very big fan of it, so I've kept it.
No, I was definitely cheering you on, and I think it's a unique trait in a man to be able to pull off a mustache. Not everyone can do it. I think you're definitely doing it great. So I'm happy you're still doing it.
I appreciate that.
Wonderful. Well, Erik,
my wife would be so happy.
Well, Erik, thank you so much for speaking to me. This was great.
Yeah, it's a great time. Thank you, Konrad.
Yeah,
a good time as always.
We'll need to do this again sometime soon. Hopefully you're back in New York with some good stories from there.
Would love to.
All right. Take care, man.
You too. Thanks.